A very good afternoon to all of you. I am Priyanshi, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and Forestry Group to today's webinar on the next generation of energy innovations driving Africa's path to net zero. I take the pleasure to thank our panel members for extending their immense support to organize this event, and a very special thanks to our partner, Jinko Solar, for their immense support to organize this event. A significant barrier to economic expansion, development, and the accomplishment of sustainable development objectives in Africa's energy problem. Solar energy has the ability to significantly contribute to solving Africa's energy problem and facilitating the region's transition to a net zero future. Additionally, it can assist in lowering energy waste and raising the general effectiveness of Africa's energy infrastructure. This virtual webinar will emphasize the present energy situation in Africa, the difficulties it faces, and the possible ways to address the issue and execute a transition to net zero energy. Now, with this, I will request my team to play the promotional video of Jinko Solar. Thank you, team, for playing the sponsor video. Now, moving ahead, may I introduce Mr. Lois Bell, who is the sales manager from Jinko Solar, to give a commercial presentation for his company. Over to you, Mr. Lewis. Welcome on stage.
Thank you, Priya. Can you just confirm that everyone can see my presentation?
Yes, sir, we can see it perfectly.
Can everyone see it?
Yes, sir. Please take it ahead.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Priya, and thank you to everyone that has been able to join us this evening, or rather this afternoon. So, by way of introduction again, my name is Louis Bell. I am the sales manager for Jinko Solar, and I look after the SADC region. My email address is jotted on the slide. It's louis.bell@jinkosolar.com. So if we jump right into it, having a look at the company's overview. In terms of module shipments, we have to date delivered over 150 gigawatts. We hold 22 world records, and we were the first and still remain the only PV module manufacturer to achieve the number one ranking for 4 consecutive years, achieving this between the years 2016 right up to 2019. The current module capacity for the year is sitting at 70%, or 70 gigawatts rather, and enjoying a global market share of 15%. When we look at Jinko Solar's core business, that is the PV module manufacturing, what we have done over the years is to vertically integrate our PV industrial chain, thereby controlling the inputs and controlling the quality of those inputs, such as wafer and cell technology as well. In terms of our offerings, we also offer building integrated photovoltaic or BIPV, as well as energy storage solutions, which my colleague Wande will be diving into in the later stages. Again, looking at our core business being the PV modules, Tiger Neo being our flagship module series, caters for the residential, the CNI, as well as the utility market, with our 54 and 60 cell modules right through to our bigger power modules, your 78 cells. These offerings come in monofacial as well as bifacial offerings as well. In this section, we'll look at Jinko Solar's commitment to using 100% clean energy by the year 2025. Jinko Solar joined the RE100 and the EP100 green initiatives in 2019, pledging to power its factories and global operations with 100% renewable energy sources by 2025. The energy management system will be deployed to all our operations throughout the company by 2030, and energy production efficiency will increase by 30% compared to 2016. And these are just some of the tangible strides and commitments that we have had to date towards achieving the RE100 by 2025, with 3 zero carbon plants that have already been built in Yunnan, Sichuan, and Malaysia. Though the topic itself needs no introduction, I think it is also important to just highlight the what, the why, as well as the how as far as net zero is concerned. We understand that net zero refers to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to as close as possible to zero. And the reason why this is important is if we are to achieve the Paris Agreement's goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, emissions must decrease by 45% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050, thereby averting the worst effects of climate change and maintain a livable planet. How this can be achieved, we also understand that around 3/4 of greenhouse gas emissions now come from the energy sector. Carbon emissions would be significantly reduced if electricity from renewable sources, like wind or solar in this case, were to replace coal, gas, and oil-fired power. Thankfully, the International Energy Agency has confirmed that renewable energy will become the world's largest source of electricity in the near future. If we look at the period between 2022 through to 2027, the expectation is that renewable energy installation will hit around 2,400 gigawatts, translating to 480 gigawatts per year. By the year 2025, renewable energy generated electricity will exceed that of coal. And by the year 2027, the cumulative PV installation will surpass all other power sources. Now, Jinko Solar, being an innovative technology provider, leads the industry with the cutting-edge N-type cell technology, holding the world record efficiency at 26.4%. If we look at the best cost comparison versus the mono-PERC half cell, the N-type technology comes out on top, as well as when we're comparing the HJT or heterojunction technology, the N-type TOPCon technology comes out best. When we delve into deeper in terms of the Tiger Neo and its benefits, we're looking at the advanced warranty of 30 years as a performance warranty. The first year degradation is less than 1%, and the linear degradation is negative 0.5%. Tiger Neo also has an improved bifacial factor of 85%. With N-type's higher bifacial factor, this will bring significant power gain of around 2.05% versus the P-type, the bifacial factor of that sitting at around 70%. We're also able to achieve with Tiger Neo a better low light performance compared with the traditional PERC modules, extending the power generation period by about 1 hour in the morning as well as in the evening. Another elite benefit of Tiger Neo is the improved temperature coefficient. On the far right, we've seen an improvement in temperature coefficient throughout the various types of generation or PV module technology. And we're seeing the significant change, or rather the significant improving improvement when we move from mono-PERC half cell of 0.35% per degree Celsius, TOPCon at 0.29% per degree Celsius. And on the far left, we see an example that is illustrated by a 550 watt module, P-type, as well as an N-type. And we see the power gain of the N-type as far as increases in cell temperatures are concerned. As we understand that some parts of the SSA region experience very high temperatures throughout the year, the Tiger Neo would definitely perform well in these conditions. Again, this is just a summary of the N-type versus P-type. We understand that the modular efficiency of the N-type is over 22%. Temperature coefficient, which we touched on, the first year degradation of the P-type is sitting at 2% versus the N-type TOPCon sitting at less than 1%. Annual degradation is at 0.55% versus that of the N-type TOPCon at 0.40%. Again, bifaciality factor for the current P-type mono-PERC half cell is at 70% versus the TOPCon N-type sitting at 85%. And then these are two case studies, one in China and the other in Queensland, Australia. It's a 1.5 megawatt carport structure. Here we see that the TOPCon modules generated an average of 4.2% higher than PERC modules. And the white steel structure, also 1.5 rooftop in Queensland, TOPCon modules generated 5.5% higher than PERC modules during the summer months and 4.3% during winter months. In summary, we understand that the net zero challenge isn't subject or isn't specific to a country or a region, but that it is a global challenge. We also believe that the net zero is achievable through the continuous improvement in technology, and the technology itself will aid in the acceleration of Africa's path to net zero. And as far as JinkoSolar's commitment is concerned, we are 100% committed to supporting Africa to achieve net zero. Thank you so much. Again, my email address is over there.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insightful presentation. Now, let us move ahead with the panel discussion for today. Allow me to introduce the right panel for today. Ms. Yevande from Jinko Solar, Mr. Nathan from Caracal Engineering, Ms. Nomfundu from Mulilo Energy Holdings, Mr. Michelle from Rensource Energy, and Mr. Gabriel from InPower. And Mr. Gabriel will be the moderator for the session. Here, I would like to make a small announcement. Attendees can post their questions in the Q&A box, and our speakers and the moderator will answer those questions at the end of the panel discussion. Without any further ado, let us initiate with our much-awaited panel session for the today. Over to you, Mr. Gabriel. Please take it ahead.
Thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for joining. Gabriel Cruz, head of engineering at InPower. And to dive in, I want to say I'm very excited to hear about the innovation that I've seen in the presentation from Jinko. Yeah, many of these I weren't aware of. I was under the impression that in terms of technology development for solar PV modules we've reached a plateau, and that we would not be very likely to see further improvements in PV modules or the way that they are being used. And I've already learned something today, so I'm excited to be here. But before we talk about the innovations and how we can get to net zero, I think it would be good to take a look at where we at the moment, and the challenges we are facing in Africa, the landscape. So Nathan, can I ask you to maybe just give your view on the current energy landscape in Africa, and the challenges we are facing as in the region, and then we can talk about the innovations and potential solutions a little bit later.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks for everybody joining in to listen today. My name is Nathan from Caracal Engineering. We specialize in the mounting structures, but we have a bit of an eye and sensitivity for sort of macro factors that influence our sector. So, I mean, when you look at the context of Africa, it obviously has a great deal of challenges to overcome before we can really start deep diving into the technological improvements that can be made. I mean, we can effectively, sum these up in sort of 4 or 5 broad themes. The one being a lack of access, the second being reliance on existing fossil fuels, insufficient infrastructure, lack of investment, and the policy and regulatory frameworks that are present on the continent. If all 5 sort of contribute to a landscape that makes moving into this net zero objective quite difficult. My sentiment with a lot of this stuff is that if you don't have the right foundations and building blocks, we're effectively just discussing high-level things that are impossible to implement. When considering the South African context, I keep hearing our politicians bandy about the fourth industrial revolution without much understanding as to what that exactly means. And I think there's a habit to repeat the most sort of current jargon without necessarily understanding what needs to be done. So if we can ease things and make it more logical and solidify the regulatory frameworks, that would go a long way to stimulating investment. In terms of the chronic skills deficits that we have on the continent, we need to start off with formative education that concentrates its energy on stimulating artisanal skills as opposed to consolidating the vast majority of its talent in the financial sector. So those are really just 2 elements, but those 5 broad themes from a high level, I think, have bearing on just about everything that cascades from it.
Okay, that's very interesting. Maybe Nomfundo, if you want to talk to us about the different scales or the different levels in which we can attack this thing, and I'm thinking specifically along the lines of or let me start off by saying that I'm of the opinion that there's no one silver bullet, and we can't attack this on just a residential scale or on a utility scale or on a sort of continental scale. There's different levels, there's different areas or different sort of strategies that we need to take on and to tackle this beast from all angles. And maybe you can talk to me about the utility scale and the contrast between that and the mini grids, microgrids, or residential solutions that we would typically find in the market.
Thanks, Gabriel. My name is Nomfundo Mbichekana. I work for Molelo. It's one of the South African IPPs based in Cape Town. It's quite a very, I think, an interesting conversation to have, considering that on the 9th of February, our President Ramaphosa declared the state of disaster when it comes to our energy crisis. And I think from that perspective, it really speaks to what is it that one can do as an individual, and I think as a collaborative or united, from a united perspective, which is private sector government. And I think from my perspective, there's a lot of talk, as Nathan mentioned, and I think sometimes the talk just becomes more like a repetitive conversation. But I think considering that there is a need to come up with solutions now, a part of me does commend government and the provincial governments with a couple of steps that they've taken in terms of regulatory processes, where there was an announcement with that state of disaster that there will be some reinvestment from the household solutions that one can implement, specifically on the PV modules. And there's a couple of other conversations happening, the private PPA space, which is also taking a big chunk of the responsibility with the mining. I mean, considering that mining is part of the leading consumers in our energy space. They've also just taken a very big leap of faith in considering the renewable energy solutions that are there. We've seen a couple of articles coming out, Sasol signing some PPAs with different IPPs, mining sector also taking that decision. I think for me, it's more of a collaborative approach. There isn't a solution that is one fits all. And I think it's more of considering what is potentially available and consider South Africa has got different dynamics from each province to the other. And I think a solution that would work in the Eastern Cape might not probably work in the Western Cape. So it's thinking along those lines to saying what is it that we can implement and break it down to the last person on the ground, considering again affordability, which is an issue at the moment in the country. So there is I think a very wide spectrum of solutions that one can look at, but at the same time, it also comes to a personal decision. If you do have capacity to assist in terms of offloading from the grid or assisting or supporting the grid, I think there's just a lot of opportunities out there. Thanks,
It's
Gabriel.
interesting that you mentioned that the solutions that you could work in the Eastern Cape might not necessarily work in the Western Cape. And, I think some of the challenges that I've seen is that most of the technology development happens in first world countries. And they often think that they can just bring a first world solution to Africa and that it's just going to work. They don't realize the challenges that we face, in terms of, and a simple example, internet connectivity. They would just assume that anywhere they put their mini grid or microgrid or batteries or inverters, that they will have access to the internet, which isn't a true statement. Or that they would be able to drive a truck, with the PV modules or batteries to where they need to get to. And that, none of those are accurate assumptions. And there's a lack of understanding from the guys that are building the solutions, and they don't necessarily understand the circumstances or the challenges, where we need to install or implement these. So before we touch on that further, maybe Michael, here's a question for you. Now, if we were to, or Africa is another challenge in terms of electrification. So there's a really large number of people within Africa that still don't have access to electricity. Now, if we were to suddenly, get all of them grid connected, the demand would increase, and still a significantly bigger portion of our electricity will come from coal fire or diesel generators, which means that we're actually increasing our carbon footprint, not decreasing it. So there's this conflict between electrification and decarbonization, or the path to net zero. And there's definitely a role for innovation to play in terms of enabling us to do both, to increase electricity access, and still improve our path, towards a carbon, reduced carbon footprint. So, if you want to maybe just comment on that and see, talk to us to what you think, how those conflicting sort of needs can be managed, and what type of innovations you would like to see that enables us to meet both of those goals.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. That's a very interesting question. Yes, so basically already there's a massive improvement, innovation going on in the mini grid space, especially in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. And this is a far cry from what it should be. However, there's an improvement. I remember 2012, 2013, when I joined the renewable energy space. The first mini grid that I saw then was with tubular batteries, right? So you can imagine where we are now. So they were using tubular batteries. Imagine NG that just signed a $60 million project with Cross Boundary last year to solarize 150,000 connections. So you can imagine using tubular batteries to solarize such a community. So it would have been very challenging. So with the innovation of ESS, it's very easy to have a sustainable solution for mini grids, and there is a standardized solution that you can easily roll out on. And this is how innovation can really improve access to a particular country. Okay, Nigeria aims to make 5 million connections, right? And if you want to use the regular types of systems without going for innovation. Like I heard what Jinko presented, talking about how you can improve the panels, the yield, right, from the panels using the N-type panel. That's a form of innovation whereby you can offset a greater amount of CO2 using just a small land space. Okay, so in terms of levelized cost of energy, when you go for the current innovation, you tend to use smaller space to offset a lot of CO2 by reducing the need for generators, and integrating storage solutions like ESS is a fantastic innovation. I know a couple of companies are coming into Nigeria, and I know they're active in Kenya with ESS, energy storage system, which is really an innovation for the moment. With that, you can easily scale, and you tend to offset greater amount of CO2. That is a clear example of how innovation can help us achieve the energy access goal, at the same time reducing enough CO2. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thanks, Michael. I completely agree with you. And you've touched on batteries now. So I think the next question I'm going to pass to you, Wanda. And there's something that I've seen. Firstly, I'm excited to see Jinko also building batteries now. But Jinko, in my opinion, or I've known Jinko for being a solar, PV module manufacturer. I've also seen inverter companies. You talk about Huawei or Sungrow, building batteries, and then there are other battery specialist companies that build batteries. So it feels like everybody wants to tap into this big demand for batteries at the moment. And maybe you wonder if you can talk to us, about the way that batteries can be utilized, both off grid and in the sort of grid scenarios, to and the innovations around batteries, and what has happened to batteries over the past, let's say, 5 years, that has suddenly made it a viable option, enables people to get
Okay,
off grid, or
your voice is
run
a little
the batteries
muffled up.
out there, so power their homes from a solar electricity. Before you answer that, something I just wanted to mention to the general listeners is that batteries are great in that they can provide us with the reliability and the penetration of energy, but something that you need to be aware of is you can never have just batteries alone, because the energy needs to come from somewhere. You either need to charge them from grid or from space. So just solar is off grid systems. Just use the development of batteries that has brought us to a place where it is now a feasible solution.
Mr. Gabriel, your voice is a little muffled up. We are not able to hear you properly.
Okay, so I did hear Gabriel's question. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Also, I
Okay.
would like to tell everyone that Miss Glory has also joined us. So Miss Glory and Mr. Gabriel both can, uh, throw some questions on the panelists and take the discussion ahead together, if that sounds well. Okay,
That works
perfect.
fine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriel, for that question. One of the things that is peculiar for Jinko Solar is not just remaining as a solar PV manufacturer and supplier. And one of the things that is key for us is becoming an energy service, integrator. So we don't want to just supply and then walk away. We want to be part of the sustainable development goals, especially for Africa. We want to be involved in that electrification process, ensuring that acceleration to energy access, reducing energy poverty, and of course, eradicating poverty itself that comes with the effect of lack of electricity or energy is there. And that was one of the reasons why we expanded our portfolio into energy storage solutions. Now, the energy storage solutions that we prefer and we provide is not just the string inverters. We ensure that it's hybrid inverters, plug and play energy storage solutions, ranging from the residential scale all the way to the utility scale. And one of the reasons why we did this is to ensure that we cover the B2Bs to B2Cs. So not just skewed to one side of the end user, but covering all aspects of the end users. We moved, of course, not lead acid batteries, but lithium iron phosphate batteries. And that's because it's also key for us for energy efficiency, ensuring that whatever we're delivering to our clients gives them the optimal value of what they're purchasing. And we know that, from research and from what we've seen, that the energy density, the energy intensity, energy efficiency of lithium-ion batteries are way better than lead-acid batteries. Of course, when it comes to the cycle life, when it comes to the useful life of the batteries as well, you see that lithium-ion batteries way surpasses lead-acid, and that's why when Jinko came into the energy storage space in 2021, we went straight to lithium-ion batteries. And we are proud to say that we're working consistently and, of course, expanding our horizon with mini-grid developers, C&I companies, utility scale companies within West Africa, even Africa at large. I'm proud to say that we're working with the likes of Resource, who's here on the call, many other developers in Nigeria, in Kenya, DRC, Rwanda, Ghana, and the like, South Africa as well. And innovation is key for sustainable development, especially sustainable development and electrification in Africa. Today we see what's going on in South Africa. The grid is not able to give the optimum supply of electricity to the end users, to the customers, to the citizens, even despite the fact that they've gone into solar energy. I mean, when you look at South Africa today, when you take out Morocco and Egypt, South Africa becomes the third largest investor on solar systems. But then you see that energy storage is key, is nascent to sustainable energy transition to net zero, right? You want to have that backup storage. You want to ensure that because of the intermittency of solar or even wind during the day, because you get it during the day more, what do you need as your backup at night, right? Or when there is lower resource of solar during the day. And so you see that you need lithium-ion batteries or you need energy storage. I mean, it could even be hydrogen, it could be pumped water storage, it could be compressed air, it could be anything else, it could be salt, something else that could do that backup. But of course, we know that today lithium-ion is really as advanced when it comes to innovations and technological that we see today. And that's why Jinko Solar is very, very positioned, and we're expanding and growing in that space, not to steal the market, but of course, to compete and to win in the market, and to ensure that we give our customers and our end users the best solution for all the energy projects. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe, Glory, you want to comment on that or quickly introduce yourself, and then perhaps talk to us about strategies that Africa can use that will enable us to adopt some of these innovations quicker. Oh, sorry, Nathan, do you want to quickly just comment on that first?
Yeah, please, Gabriel. It's actually a question more directed to yourself and previous speaker. What are your sentiments on the different types of storage technology coming through? I mean, at the moment we're working with an EPC who's installing a fairly large-scale vanadium flow battery, and obviously, the question is always, or at least from my perspective, is like, is this the right horse for the right course? So I mean, I'm quite keen, given your proximity to batteries and storage, as well as Jinko's. What your sentiments are with some of the other technologies available.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Gloria, and we'll come back to you just after this. At the moment, we are in the process of building a 2.5 MVA, 5.7 megawatt hour battery, which when it's done, I think it will be the largest sort of C&I battery in South Africa, at least. I don't know of many ones that are bigger. But those are all lithium ion. And I think the beauty of lithium ion in this particular solution is that it's scalable. You can just add more batteries or add more racks or more cells, if and when required. Which is something that flow batteries, would be challenged against. Where the flow batteries, typically the economies of scale that you're looking at, you need to be 10 megawatt hours bigger and typically long duration. So sort of 4 to 8 hours would make more sense. This is a 2-hour battery where I think the economies of scale isn't exactly big enough yet flow batteries to make sense. Now, if you deal with the REAP round projects, the emergency rounds in South Africa, or the bigger utility scale batteries, that is definitely needed across Africa. I think other technologies could come into play. You talk about pumped hydro, you talk about compressed air, thermal energy storage, and flow batteries could definitely be cost competitive and could make more commercial sense. The big reason why lithium-ion batteries, is seeing the development it sees is because of the investment for the vehicle, the mobile battery markets. The likes of the Teslas, these guys are investing, billions of dollars in research in order to make lithium-ion batteries smaller, bringing the balance of plant costs down. And the scales that they're manufacturing this at, means that the volumes that they're producing it, results in lower overall production costs. So 90% of the lithium-ion batteries, manufactured in the world go into vehicles, and about 10% of them, go into stationary storage projects. So we're really benefiting from the EV markets that's booming. As an industry, we are benefiting or riding those coattails. And unfortunately, flow batteries or other, iron air batteries, and whichever chemistries you talk about, they don't see the same level of investment, and they don't have the same benefits. They don't have the same spin-offs from the EV market. That said, they are still developing, and they are going to be there or thereabouts in the not too distant future. They're just not seeing the same level of attention, which means that at the moment, the lithium-ion batteries are still relatively cheap, relatively available, easy to deploy, and small and dispatchable. So that's the biggest reason why it is the bulk of the installations we see at the moment is lithium-ion batteries. So but I would love to see more, and I've really tried. I've looked at various different projects where I've wanted flow batteries to work. I just haven't found a specific one where we've been able to get the commercials to get to a place where it works. So most of the flow battery projects you'll see at the moment are pilot sites that are in development, and they are sort of funded by the owners of the batteries or the developers or the mines in order to prove the concept. But there will be a space where they do become commercially competitive. Okay, so back to Gloria. Gloria, thanks for joining us. We know you've had some technical challenges. Maybe talk us from where we would see ourselves at the moment, somewhere along the lines to a path where we're reaching anything remotely close to a net zero or a reduced carbon footprint, and what role innovation can play in getting us there.
Oh, thank you for that. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the initial hitches that I had. Good to see you all. Good to see Yewande and Mr. Michael and all of the speakers. Okay, the question was about where I see innovation, right? So I see that right now we are failing on the path to net zero. We're not on the way to get to net zero. And IPCC have just released their reports. After 8 years of hard work working on the report, they say that we are nearing net zero, just like the keynote speaker pointed out. We're nearing the tipping point, right? Which is the point of no return. And so with that said, there are opportunities for more innovation to be developed, but I see that there is less awareness for the younger generation, thinking about the grassroots, innovative development in the grassroots level, lack of opportunities for those. So what I really see, what I think should be picked up really quickly is more opportunities on the grassroots level, right, to support those innovative ideas that our young students, young community members are having, because these people know where the shoe pinches the most, right? These are the people that are living without electricity access. They are the ones that are working in places without electricity, and we have to work together with them. Also thinking about clean cooking as well, looking at the women who make the big decisions. I once came across a clean cooking initiative where so much money has been spent to provide access to clean cooking technology for these women, but none of them were using it, right? And so none of them were making use of it, and they just dumped the clean cook stoves. So what went wrong here? Research had gone on, money provided, funding approved, and yet the women were not using the clean cook stove. They simply said that they simply said that it was easier for them to use the dirty fuel. I'm saying that because innovation can only thrive when the people are carried along, and when you allow the people who are the users to develop the innovation, right? So imagine just coming up with this idea and lumping it in the community on the community members and just expecting them to run with it. It's important to support them develop their own innovation. I think that will really speed up. That will really help us get to net zero faster when all of these people are involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Glory. So that sounds very much like a strategic approach, and something that can be taken on almost, I want to say, on a political or socioeconomic level, rather than a technology or an innovation in terms of the hardware. And I guess innovation, should really be, in both of those, both on a political, socioeconomic, and on a hardware level. And I'd like to get your thoughts also before we move on to the next speaker, in terms of what role you think governments can play to drive, the uptake of these, I want to say, quick wins or easy behavioral changes that will enable us to improve our carbon footprints.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I know I've answered a similar question before where I said that government, I'm always coming from the point of education, right? Because I believe that that's at the basic level, right? Government can organize exchanges. At the basic level, our young ones need to know what's going on. And I like to give the kudos to Jinko Solar and the organizers of this webinar, because knowledge sessions like this is what really help people to know what's going on, right? To know the need areas, to know the opportunities, to know the companies. For instance, some of my students are looking for information around how to distribute, for instance. And so when they attend webinars like this, they will be able to learn from the speakers and to learn where they can find those things. So government can encourage this kind of thing often to ensure that these kinds of conversations can be held, right? So that people know what to do. And government can also provide support in terms of exchanges. Government can support education, encourage exchange programs. People from Nigeria go to this country to learn. People from South Africa come to Nigeria to learn, look at the landscapes, see what's happening, see best practices over here, see what's functioning, and use that in developing their own innovation. So that's how government can also encourage community interventions, and that also is very similar to what I said before, working with the community, right? Government can work with these community leaders, community-based organizations to provide access to knowledge, access to funding, access to technology, right? That will enable us to get to net zero faster. Thank you.
Okay, that's very good. And how do we ensure then that this is a long-term, feasible approach? How do we ensure that it's not just a now thing? And maybe I'm going to pass that on to one of the other speakers. Maybe Michael. You want to touch on how do we think this is how do we make sure that this is not just implemented once off by this generation, and then as soon as we move on, the rest of the guys have forgotten about this?
Sorry to interrupt, but Glory ma'am, since Glory ma'am is with us, she can also throw some questions on other panelists. and she can take it ahead, if that is okay.
Sure, please go for it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, thank you. I thought by now we have already covered all of the questions, right? Um, I really think that Mr. Gabriel can pick up because you know where you have stopped in the questions. Please, I'm happy to respond to some questions as well. But please carry on so that you can just pick up from where you have stopped. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Priyanshi. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Glory. Sorry, Gabriel, I didn't get your question. Is it possible? I think your line is breaking, or maybe it's mine. I don't know. Is it possible to
Sorry,
repeat your question?
no, I think it's mine. I think the question was, sure. The question was, how do we ensure that whatever we are building in terms of innovation or approach is sustainable and not just a now solution, but that it can continue to roll out into the future?
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for that question, Gabriel. One of the challenges in Africa that I've noticed is actually the maintenance culture that we don't have. Right? It's one thing to set up a project. It's another thing to maintain it. In fact, we should invest more, like Gabriel said, Glory said, on capacity development around asset management, operation and maintenance. And if we do that, the projects that we are planning to execute will be sustainable. Okay, for example, in Rensos, as the VP commercial, I'm also heading the business development team and the asset management team in Rensos. Okay, so we own these assets, and over time, we're looking at 25 years, most of them, some of them 20 to 25 years. So if there is no proper planning in terms of operation and maintenance, ongoing operation and maintenance, these ideas that we have here will fail. Okay, so the challenge with renewable energy street light when it came in is that poor maintenance culture that was noticed with them, right? And it was a big challenge when, as a salesman, when you go to sell, they will just point to, your client will just point to a street light that is not working and tell you that that is what he sees as solar, right? Because there was poor maintenance culture. So whatever idea, innovation that we are looking at towards meeting the net zero target, we should as part of a necessary step to incorporate maintenance. Maintenance is key, right? So even when we are doing capacity development, part of what we should be focusing in is project management and maintenance. Also, I noticed that one of the reasons why a lot of projects fail is because of the high expectation from the finance they get. Some of these finance, the expectations are just too high. Some of them expect the project developers to break even in 5 years, right? I think if the government can support and de-risk that sector, increase the break-even time and the expectations from these investors, I think it will go a long way to help the sector for us to do more. A lot of companies want to do more. For example, Rensos was able to develop a pipeline of 14 megawatts is in the pipeline to be executed this year. We've signed it. We're just waiting to execute. And some of them has ESS, just like Yewande say, we are using a lot of Jinko ESS in our solution. So if we don't have sustainable finance in it and we don't build a maintenance culture, most of these projects will fail. Thank you very much.
Nathan.
Gabriel, your line is a little bit better.
Yeah, it's actually a sort of general comment for the panel, or a general question for the panel. We often talk about the lack of sustainable investment and skills transfer, development, etc. But I'm keen to get a perspective from everybody within this panel, given that we sort of touch every geography across the continent, as to how African governments can de-risk projects in a viable way, given the the tough position of the sovereign balance sheet and the number of pulls on that balance sheet. So obviously there's need for education, healthcare, transport infrastructure, etc., incentives to catalyze investment in other sectors. But it's quite difficult to justify to funders why it's a good idea to invest in Central African Republic or the DRC. It's not to say these places are uninvestable, but they do bring with them a great deal of challenge. So that obviously then translates into higher risk costs on the investor's side, and then speaks to Michael's point about the difficulty in securing sustainable finance at reasonable rates, where the expectation of returns not within 5 years, but rather within 20 years. So to sort of put a bow on my commentary is, what ways do you think these governments can go about facilitating a greater degree of trust in them, so that funders and sort of international investors, etc., feel warm and fuzzy when they put their dollar, dirham, or pound sterling into that country?
Okay, can I go first? Okay, can I go first? If you can all hear me. So I'm gonna use the case study of Morocco, and Morocco is one very interesting case study that the government themselves became a very, very important factor for electrification. And I'm talking about speedy access to electricity. Now, between 1993 and 2005 in Morocco, electrification access was about 13%. But then between 2007 and 2018, 2019, it went to 93. And now we even have much more. They are selling out to other countries. Why? Because the government became a very important part, and that's one about stakeholder involvement. When you look at project management, project development, Lean Six Sigma, and all those things, it talks about the involvement of the leadership. Now, the moment the leadership of anywhere, now we're looking at leadership of a country, the government becomes very interested in the growth of that economy, of that government. Now we're talking about the energy sector, the electricity sector of a country. You will see that things will begin to move faster. One, the policies, the regulations, the backup of the government becomes important to ensure that things move well. Now we look at countries like, look at Nigeria. We still have duties on our components, solar components. I mean, we want to electrify the country. We have the solar resource. We don't have power, and then we're still putting duty on the solar components. It does not even add up. So where we see the government making putting a foothold on the ground is in policies, enacting policies that are reasonable, that are sustainable, that will definitely work for the end users. Having private-public partnerships that encourage, private or foreign direct investors to come into the country to invest on sustainable or clean energy. Also, when we look at the political environment or the socio-economic environment of a country, now, if there is insecurity, if there is instability and volatility when it comes to the exchange rate, the local currency, foreign currencies, political instabilities, it's going to push, it's going to increase the risks of investors, even either local or foreign guys, to come into the country. So these are things that, the government needs to put in place. Political stability is very important. Economic, social, security, including physical security, is important for any investor. No investor wants to, pump in millions of dollars, and tomorrow you say there's an insurgency, and then you blow up his facility, his solar system, his solar farm, or something like that. I mean, it's going to get into a lot of deficits. When you come to, the government becoming very involved, take away duties, take away, the value-added tax, high value-added tax that makes it difficult for local developers or even investors to come into the country to invest and expand or scale up solar or clean energy projects that bring us net zero. Then we begin to see some very good metrics on the Africa's scale for sustainable energy growth? Thank you.
Can I quickly
Nomfundo,
add
do
to
you
that?
have a comment?
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Glory.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much, Yewande, for sharing that. She has said something that is very important: policy. I also think that governments can provide access to public and private partnerships, right? And work with private sector companies to develop and finance solar projects. And they need to, when they've set up the policy, this one can now be very possible. The policy has to be transparent to ensure that whoever is investing can get a maximum return, and for those people to know that they have the backing of the government. So these types of partnership can leverage on the strengths of both the public and the private sectors to create that supportive environment, so that these solar projects and reduce some of those risks that come with it. They can also think about offering financial incentives such as tax breaks, subsidies. I know that in Nigeria now, there's a big talk around subsidies, so removing the subsidy that is on the fossil fuel. So that's another big talk coming up. But government can provide that kind of guarantee to investors to show that they can reduce that financial risk, right? These incentives can make these solar projects more attractive. And then she also talked about political risk, which is really very, very important. Government can help to reduce some of the instabilities that go on, especially in need areas, right? Over time, this has been a bit of a discouragement to some investors because of some high need areas in Nigeria, which are also high risk. I'm talking about Nigeria as an example here. So things like violence, political violence, and all these things related to that. They can help encourage the investors. They can show the investors what they have done to solve it, and they shouldn't just be complacent about it and expect that investors understand. So, yeah, just to build up to what Yewande have said. Thank you.
Hi, Nomfundo from the side. I think I've just been listening for the past 10 minutes, and there's a lot of government. I think I've heard the word government more than 50 to probably 70 times. And my question, or probably a comment, is what is the role of private sector in this conversation? What is it that they can do to assist or support government? I'm looking at the rural areas that don't have access. So when you talk about investment, those are the last people on the ground that are not even part of the bigger picture. How do we get to a point as Africa where we say a child who is in the deep villages of the Eastern Cape or KZN has access to electricity, or is benefiting from a net zero conversation? How do we get to that? I understand government is the bigger player, or probably has more of a muscle to make the decisions. But I think as Africa, we also need to get to a point where there is some ownership as citizens that we take upon ourselves. And why am I saying that from an industry perspective? What is it that we can assist government with? We've seen the mines coming on board in South Africa saying they want to be in the forefront of the net zero. They've got financial capacity and they want to run process and collaborate with government. But I think at the bottom line is there is the lower class of our African citizens that also need to be part of this transition. Actually, someone else said, Nomfundo, it's not even a transition, but to benefit, because they are still in darkness. So they need someone to pull them out of that darkness. So it's more of a question or a comment than a contribution.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And part of it is the government's active contribution in enabling this. We've talked about taxes and potentially legislation, but part of it is also government just getting out of the way and allowing the private sector to do what they can do and to do. But in some instances, they are prohibited, either through legislation or regulations or, penalties or, additional sort of charges that gets, put onto the solar and battery projects or, mini grids. So I think with that, I'm going to give each of
Can I just add a little thing to what Nomfundo said?
Sure.
So on the private side, I think another thing that the private sector can do is energy efficiency and energy conservation. So every citizen of every country, I mean, every individual, from the young to the old, should become responsible and accountable for how they use energy. So, because even when you deploy the largest PV system, or the one in Egypt or the one in, you have in China and all, if there is no energy conservation and energy efficiency mentality in mind, you're going to realize that you're either going to run down that system, that old farm, or you're not gonna even get the optimal use or optimal advantage of the reason why you deploy that. So for every citizen, every individual, I mean, now this is the private guys, every individual, your first level of responsibility is how you use energy. How efficient are you in using energy? Do you leave all the lights on when you leave your house for work? Do you consume electricity? I mean, just because you have 24/7 power supply, do you're not concerned about the energy levels, that's the A ratings of the appliances you purchase, and things like that, because in the end, energy efficiency, according to IEA, takes about 40% of of how well you can conserve and sustain energy, how well you can transition to net zero. We're talking about the fact that global warming is increasing and everything. Energy conservation, energy efficiency, how you even consume the energy is and it is important that every individual, I mean, this is now the private involvement, is very intentional about energy efficiency and energy conservation. Thank you.
Yeah. So energy saving is truly the first source. You need to save before we can generate. So, and that, I think I'm going to give each of the speakers a final chance to pose some closing remarks, and then we can end off with Glory to close off the session for us. I think I've said enough, so I'll go straight on to who's first on my list. Nathan.
Yeah, I don't mind going first. I think with these discussions around net zero, there needs to be an understanding that there's going to be a bump in emissions. Can you hear me? Am I clear?
Yeah, Nathan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think my sentiment around net zero is that there has to be a bump on the front end to develop the necessary infrastructure to facilitate African country development. So there needs to be somewhat of an expectation that we're going to see a rise before we see any sort of significant fall, given the incredibly low base from which most African states are coming from. So I think there needs to be that as like almost a human development objective first. Some things we're not going to get away from in terms of their relative pollution or carbon emission contribution. Road construction, bridges, ports, etc. And these things need to be in place in order for African economies to grow. The Chinese performed an economic miracle and brought 700 million people out of poverty, but they had to build at an astonishing rate. So the challenge will remain that on the front end. So I think added to that was some of the commentary from Nomfundo in terms of private participation in the in facilitating these rollouts. I think it has to be a give or take, but the receiver of the information from a state level needs to be open-minded enough to accept the proposals, and that it's a give and take. It's no problem for the private sector if the rules are set, and you can invest in your own plant equipment, your own energy generation for green hydrogen production, which effectively could make things net zero, given you're exporting clean energy to the West, Europe and the States, etc. But these public-private participations or partnerships need to be based on an equal grounding. It can't be a case of one taking more than the other. So returning to what I was saying about the rule setting, and engaging the sort of the extremely rural communities of KZN and the Eastern Cape, if you set the parameters within the relationship that you're entitled to build your large-scale PV plants, all over Gauteng and the Northern Cape, but you have to contribute towards the electrification of those communities. The private sector will have no issue doing this because there's an incentive on the other end. And I think often at times we tend to be too kumbaya around a fire about the ways in which we can resolve these problems. But there's going to need to be a little bit of argy-bargy between the state and the private sector to facilitate any of this. And it will be uncomfortable, I think, from both sets. But then we've got a good deal. So, yeah, I can talk for many hours on these various subjects around innovation, but I feel that if we don't set the foundations, these conversations we'll be having in the next 15 years or 20 years about how Africa can become net zero by 2070, but we haven't built the frameworks, we haven't built the skill sets. We've tried to plow ahead on certain elements that are technically not feasible. And while I do appreciate that this continent has a knack for leapfrogging, I think the leapfrogging still needed a base, and telecommunications is a good example of that. You still need a base to work from. So without the foundation, I think we could be repeating these conversations in perpetuity.
Thanks, Nathan. I think maybe Gabriel, if you can allow me to maybe just jump on after Nathan, and I want to bring the net zero conversation down to a granular level. So whilst I understand that again the contributors or the contributors towards this achievement of net zero, the bulk of that will be the commercial and industrial guys. I think to the point that Yewande made, from a granular level or at a householder level, I know that some of the issues that our utility, being Eskom, is facing is if there needs to be an education element around energy efficiencies. And it's not just a take up solar, take up renewable energy with the focus either on generation or storage. If we can get a hold of how we consume our energy, I think that will give much relief to the utility guys, being Eskom. So I think that's a start. And again, Mfunda mentioned, we've been speaking a lot about what the government can do and what the private guys can do. Again, at a granular level, I know that I think about last week, one of the leading banks in the country announced a specific package around solar financing for households and how this won't be a standalone, but you can actually incorporate the solar financing as part of the existing mortgage that you have. I think that will go a long way. I also don't think that it's been punted enough either on the news or wherever the guys are. So if you are a homeowner, you do have the option of taking up solar and incorporating that with your existing mortgage. So I think that's the one thing that we should be encouraging from a private point of view. And I think from a government point of view, again, early on in the year, I know that there was a tax relief that was pronounced by the finance minister around, and this was specific to the generation and not inverters or storage, but the tax relief is specific to the purchasing of solar panels. And I think that relief will only be lasting for a year. And there's a big debate around why is that not being extended. So if I'm going to be purchasing solar panels now and I can claim back up to the value, I think it's 15,000 Rand or 25% of the cost, why is that relief not being extended? If indeed the government is committed to net zero, which is going to be 2025, 2030 and beyond, why is the tax relief that has been approached or that has been proposed only for 1 year? So I think it does send a bit of red flag in terms of is the government actually fully committed towards this? And it doesn't give the kind of encouragement that we need as a nation. I speak specifically to South Africa. So I think those 3 points, the one is that there definitely has to be an education element from an energy efficiency point of view, never mind even taking up renewable energy as a added source. And then I think there's definitely more to be done both on the private side and on the government side. Thanks, Gabriel.
Yeah,
Okay. Who wants to
I'll
take
jump
the
in.
next one?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think my comment or my contribution would be more on a conversation of sustainability. How do we get to a point as Africa where we own this transition, that it becomes ours? We've mentioned training, we've mentioned a whole lot of innovation that is coming through to Africa. But my discomfort, I think if I have to put it in that fashion, is that are we at a point after 10 years, looking at South Africa, when the first projects were implemented in 2012, commissioned in 2014, are we at a point as a country or as a nation where we are saying we know where we're going? There is a part of us that is taking ownership of this concept of net zero or the renewable energy concepts or technologies, so that we get to a point where we are able to maintain this project without having to rely so much on the support from outside Africa. And I think the second part is on the local content, especially on a utility scale point of view. I think a couple of guys are exposed to that. There is an obligation of local content, but we have seen that that local content is easily achievable, or that percentage, by procuring certain things that I would say are not necessarily strategic from a technology point of view, where we only buy circuit breakers, we only buy certain components locally, but the key or strategic or core components still come from outside Africa. And we still rely so much in terms of support, upgrades, a whole lot of things from a maintenance and sustainability point of view. And I think as Africa, it's something that we need to collaboratively look at. How do we get to a point where we have skill sets and the innovation is ours, and we own this transition and it becomes proudly African? And it's not something that at some point feels like it's imposed, or it's something that it's a bus that one is just has to get on while it's moving. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Namfundo. Let me just quickly share my summary. I think you've raised a very important point, Namfundo. There's a lot of opportunities for Africa as well to begin to develop, to play a key role in the manufacturing of some of these equipment. So as an advocate, I've also started to advocate for those kinds of opportunities. But I just want to close by saying that it's very important it's very urgent to transition to a sustainable future. And I'd like to encourage all the listeners and the people, the companies that are here. You're all playing a very big role to ensure that this will happen, and to promote renewable energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There is a big potential for growth in the industry. And as you've heard from all of the speakers, solar has one of the biggest opportunities, and by 2025 should be the highest renewable energy in use. It's important to keep on investing in research and development, and just to stay ahead of the future. And like Africa has to really come up, like Nomfundo said, to take a lead, right, in the development of these technologies as well. I also want to promote collaboration. As you can see in the chat box, lots of things going on there. I think it's important to stay in touch and collaborate and communicate with one another, and to find ways to work together, right? Achieving net zero will require urgent action and collective effort from everyone in all of the sectors of society, government, businesses, individuals. It's important for all of us to work together to accelerate the deployment of renewable energies, improve energy efficiency, and reduce greenhouse gases. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Michael, okay, can go.
Yes, thank you, Priyanshai. Let me just quickly say this point that achieving net zero is not rocket science. We still need the base, just like Nathan said. I listened closely to what you said. We should work on the government again. I will still mention the government should help us with having a smart grid, right? Let's get the grid right. We can consider feed-in tariff. Once there's a feed-in tariff, all this will be history. Africans are known to be entrepreneurs, right? Once you know that your roof can generate money for you, I know that you don't need to preach We don't need to preach this too long, the green energy thing. Once you know that you can generate money from your roof, that will just be a given, right? So what the government should do, we should not start from the top to the bottom. We should start from the bottom. Let's get the grid right. We have an opportunity with a challenge, both in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Kenya. We are having issues with the grid. Let them fix the grid, have the grid to be robust enough, let it be smart, and set it in such a way that we can consider feed-in tariff, and we will achieve that. Thank you very much.
Okay, lastly, I'm just gonna say that one of the major pathways to drive innovation in Africa to net zero is an enabling environment. It encompasses everything. It encompasses the robust grid, public-private partnership, capacity development, top-bottom approach or bottom-top approach, everything that's going to take us to where we want to get to in the energy transition plan. An enabling environment will lead us there, because when there's an enabling environment, everything thrives. The government is doing their part. The private guys are doing their part. The citizens are doing their part. Security is supporting because there is security. Political and economic stability is there, is doing its own part. So it encourages foreign developers to come in. It encourages public-private partnerships on a very easy level. It encourages the educational system to become robust, to integrate into the curriculums from the primary to the secondary to the tertiary level. Good trainings on sustainable development, on renewable energy, clean energy development. So when we have an enabling environment in any country, I mean, now we're bringing it back to Africa, we see that we're going to have a very speedy transition into what we're really looking for. I mean, hybridized solution is there. Nobody needs to throw away our hydro. We have a lot of hydro in Africa. So why can't we hybridize our hydro battery, hydro lithium ion, hydro solar, hydro wind? There's so many things, floating solar systems, so many things that we could actually work on. I mean, our innovations, when it comes to Africa, we are very creative, we're very innovative. But then when there is no enabling environment, we're going to struggle a lot. So I'm going to close on that, for that, when we want to move to net zero, in the energy transition plan, an enabling environment is very, very key. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you to the audience and the panelists. So, with this, we have come to the end of the virtual event, and a very special thanks to Mr. Gabriel for superbly managing the session. A big shout out to our attendees for extending your time and support for the event. We promise to come back soon with another exciting session. The floor is now open for networking. Thank you, everyone. Till then, bye from our end and take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all my co-panelists.